Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espy.
Well, first, my good evening. Welcome to Update this Tuesday evening. A whistle-stop run-through of the day's main news, which includes more reaction to this week's Council of Ministers reshuffle as the new ministers enjoy their first outing as such in the House of Keys. Also tonight, what's going to happen next with a report looking at the harm drugs cause on the Isle of Man? And do you remember news of that sculpture planned for Niarbyl? Well, we'll have an update on that here on Update. We'll also be keeping an eye on the weather and the latest traffic and travel as you head home. And once again, if you spot anything, we'd love to hear from you. 166 177, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. First, let's join Chanel for a roundup of today's main news. Faster my, Chanel.
Faster my. A tribunal's begun to rule on a dispute between Crogga and one of its founding members over an alleged unlawful deduction of pay. Dickon Sargent left his position as a director and CEO of the company in March 2022, but remains a shareholder. You can find out more on this story at manxradio.com. Almost £500,000 of government funds have been spent so far on work relating to the Moore Vannon offshore wind farm. Chair of the Energy Policy Board, Alfred Cannon, revealed in this week's sitting of the House of Keys that the project has cost £467,357 to date. The Chief Minister also stated it was not possible to provide a precise figure for future spend on the Ofsted plans.
This is broken down both in terms of external consultancy, assistance in the review of the legislative and regulatory provisions, as well as advice on setting up internal processes.
A Douglas councillor has described government's decision to stop paper recycling at Bring Banks on Island as short-sighted. Chair of the Environmental Services Committee, Falk Horning, says Douglas Council will be keeping its own for people to use and will carry on collecting the material as part of its curbside recycling scheme.
While it's a short-term financial gain for the DOI, it's also a cost-saving drive. Neglects the haulage fares that are paid to the steam packet by Douglas City Council, so it's basically saving one department some money.
And Manx Telecom is warning people of an email scam in operation. It's urging people who receive an email with the link not to click it or give out any personal information. The company is suggesting to anyone who receives this email to delete it and mark it as spam. In international news, 1,100 jobs are at risk at Vauxhall after the manufacturer's owner announced plans to shut its factory in Luton next year. Stellantis says it hopes hundreds of workers will relocate. 5 survivors have been rescued and 4 bodies recovered after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. 2 British people are believed to be among those missing. And an average of 41,000 parking tickets are being handed out every day by private firms. Analysis by the RAC shows there's a 14% increase compared to this time last year. Those are your headlines. News at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Chanel. Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. It's going to be dry and often clear this evening and tonight. Light winds, temperatures down to 3 though, so there is a touch of frost likely. Sunny spells again tomorrow, just a small risk of a shower and light northeast winds. Temperatures tomorrow will be around 8. Just looking ahead to Thursday, it'll be quite cloudy with strengthening southeast winds and there will be rain later in the day. Sunset this evening was at 4:03. Sunrise tomorrow morning, 8:10.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
Making life easier with Manx Mobility at the top of Summer Hill. Are you looking for a stair lift? Look no further with Which Magazine's #1 recommended stair lifts. Now provided by Manx Mobility. Access BDD stair lifts. Call us today on 200 680.
Carpetland, the carpet specialist with the island's best value carpets in stock, often fitted within a week. Furnitureland, for 3-piece suites, dining and living room furniture, and a selection of amazing beds. Carpetland and Furnitureland, West Street, Ramsey.
Simply income protection from Kestrel Insurance, a choice of benefits. Simple underwriting and peace of mind with a regular income for up to 2 years if you're unable to work due to illness or injury. Kestrel Insurance is registered with the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority.
Direct cremation is just that, an affordable and simple cremation without all the costs associated with a funeral service. Find out more by visiting directcremation.im or phone Direct Cremations on 478 422.
You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio. It is exactly 5:05. Now, a tribunal's begun today to rule on a dispute between Crogga and one of its founding members over an alleged unlawful deduction of pay. It's what we just heard Chanel mention in the news headlines. Dickon Sargent left his position as a director and CEO of the company in March 2022, but does remain a shareholder. Well, Manx Radio was there today. Siobhan is with me in the studio now with the details. And first, Siobhan, just remind us, who is Crogga?
Well, you've probably heard of them. Crogga is an independent company which is hoping to drill for gas under Manx waters off the coast of Mackald. It's currently got a licence to do so from government on the condition it completes a 3D seismic survey of the seabed. That licence has been extended numerous times, and in fact Crogga is now applying for a variation to it, which enables it to drill using 2D surveys carried out in the 1990s.
So what is this dispute then?
Well, the dispute comes from a decision for various directors to defer their salaries at a time when Crogga was in acute financial distress. That was in the autumn of 2020. Mr. Sargent was one of a number to have agreed initially to have his deducted by £1,500 in October and November, before sacrificing his full £8,000 monthly salary in December and then January 2021. The understanding of this deferral was that when the company had successfully secured funding, that would be repaid with an added 15% on top of it. It wasn't just directors who agreed to this, a number of suppliers also agreed to defer their invoices too. But the sticking point seems to be about the specifics of the funding that was to be secured for that repayment to be made.
Siobhan, why is there a sticking point at all?
Now, you'll have to bear with me because some of this gets a bit technical and a bit complicated. So a lot of this stems from a decision to restructure Crogga, which was founded in 2016 in early 2020. It was split then into three parts. Crogga Limited was the parent company of Crogga Energy Limited and Crogga Operations Limited. The move was said to make the company more attractive to investors. At the time of the restructure, Mr. Sargent's contract was transferred so that his employer was officially Crogga Operations Limited. This seems to be the main point the tribunal is trying to get to the bottom of. During his evidence to the tribunal today, Mr. Sargent said his understanding at the time was that his role was not changing as a result of this move. He was still CEO of Crogga Energy, something backed up by his email signature, and that there had been no change to his duties. However, Crogga's respondent claimed that from the point of the restructure, Mr. Sargent was solely an employee of Crogga Operations, something he himself agreed to as a member of the board.
Why is that important though?
Because in March 2022, Crogga Operations Limited went into liquidation, a position it remains in today. That means it's unable to pay its debts, including that which Mr. Sargent claims he's owed. But there's a difference of opinion between Crogga and Mr. Sargent about when he should have been repaid. In May 2022, after Mr. Sargent had resigned, Crogga raised £800,000 of capital by selling some of its shares at a reduced price of £1 each. Mr. Sargent claims that as this was the next time Crogga had managed to raise any funds, he should have been repaid at that point. However, Crogga is claiming the agreement was actually to repay the directors' salaries once it had completed a scheme to raise £10.3 million to conduct that 3D seismic survey of the seabed off the coast of Mackald I mentioned earlier. Its representative at today's tribunal referred to minutes from board meetings in October 2020, which suggested that to be the case. But Mr. Sargent disputes that point, claiming he and his colleagues wouldn't have agreed to the deduction if that was the case, something that was backed up by evidence given by Ewan Cottier, another director who was resigned at the same time as Mr. Sargent.
A lot of information to take in there, Siobhan. What's going to happen next?
Well, that tribunal is expected to last for 4 days and will continue tomorrow.
Thank you very much indeed, Siobhan. Coming up to 5:10. Now, you've had time to think about all those Council of Minister changes announced yesterday. How are you feeling about it all? A quick recap, just in case you've forgotten it all in the excitement. Douglas South MHK Claire Christian has taken charge of the Department of Health and Social Care. That follows Ramsey MHK Laurie Hooper's decision to resign last month. Russian MHK Michelle Haywood now heads up the Department of Infrastructure. The former DOI Minister Tim Crookall is a minister without portfolio. And it's a return to the top table for Douglas North MHK David Ashford, who's overseeing the Cabinet Office, as Glen Faber and Peel MHK Kate Lord Brennan has stepped down to turn her time and attention more fully to commitments and constituency needs as an MHK. So these new incumbents had their first run out in Keys this morning. We'll be hearing more about that on Breakfast tomorrow. But we've been out and about in Douglas to get your thoughts on the past 24 hours.
It's very important to have the right people in the right place.
So can I ask you a general question? The Isle of Man, do you think it's heading in the right direction?
It's very hard to see how it's heading in the right direction when we are so over-regulated and over-governed.
In what regards? In what areas?
In every area you care to imagine. Yeah. Every area. FSC, FSA, or the whole caboodle.
We never go backwards in regulation. The regulation we have is likely to stay there.
Indeed, yes.
We have this minister without portfolio, which basically means Tim Crookall. Well, we don't know what he's doing. He's basically there to help Mr. Cannon. It means an extra salary, of course. What's your view of that?
If it's warranted, it's always a difficult one, isn't it, what the government are doing with the money and the reserves. They're saying that our national insurance is going to run out, or the pot. You know, you don't always agree with all the decisions that are made, but this is what happens in politics. It happens in British politics all the time. They do a reshuffle and they change people's positions and try and do something different. So if that's what they're trying to do, go for it, I suppose.
I remember when I was younger, all the roads were smooth, everything, the hedges were cut, and everything. The island looks a mess at the moment because nobody's doing anything. And the promenade, walking along the promenade, it's awful because you're nearly falling into potholes and things all the time. We're going backwards. And going backwards, sounds very romantic and everything, but it's not.
Excuse me, madam, you cast your eyes skywards when I mention politics. You're not keen, I understand.
There's not much evidence that they're going in the right direction, but good luck to them.
We've got a minister without portfolio, which is we don't often get to a minister who's not actually doing a specific job, but is there to help out. What's your thoughts on that? Because there's the salary, of course, that will be going.
Yes, indeed. No, I suspect the Chief Minister just, I don't know, he's getting all the troops around him. So hopefully it'll be for the good.
Because it gives them a block vote of 10 now, which is quite useful for a Chief Minister to have.
Indeed.
That was John talking to some of the shoppers in Strand Street about their thoughts on what's been happening politically over the past 24 hours. I can't believe anybody would cast their eyes skyward, though. 12 and a half minutes past 5. We're going to stay with politics because the Chief Minister says there have been no discussions with the UK Prime Minister following reports of a Russian spy ship being escorted away from the Irish Sea. Now, Alfred Cannon was quizzed about the recent sighting of the Yantar off the island's coast in Keys this morning.
There have been no discussions between myself and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom as a result of this incident. The presence of the Russian vessel Yantar was monitored by UK defence assets as a routine procedure, and this is our expectation in the event of a reoccurrence.
Did the vessel enter Manx territorial waters and have security around the interconnectors and other key infrastructures being improved?
Well, this is fundamentally a matter for UK defence assets. Mr. Speaker, there's been no correspondence or discussions with the UK in relation to defence following reports of a Russian vessel entering Manx waters.
I wonder if the Chief Minister can confirm, as we have valuable assets of our own on the seabeds and that, is he confident now that the Isle of Man government is fully protected, and is he aware that submarines do travel around and up the Irish Sea channels through the Beaufort Channel, which was denied by a number of ministers in the past?
This is all highly classified information, Mr. Speaker. I could tell you, honourable member, but then again, I probably have to.
Not entirely given the spirit of the answer, but there's edge for the supplementary.
The point of my question, Mr. Speaker, was how is the Chief Minister reassuring the Manx public that our valuable assets, he is aware that they are being protected?
As I said, Mr. Speaker, the activities of the UK Defence Forces are not public knowledge.
No, I know.
I am confident from the discussions that I have had in Westminster with various senior politicians and indeed with the senior members of the armed forces that assets in the Irish Sea and around the coast of the United Kingdom are a matter of concern for our armed forces, and proper defence assets are distributed accordingly in that respect.
That's the Chief Minister Alfred Cannon answering some questions in the House of Keys this morning. Well, it wasn't just the MHK sitting today. The Legislative Council also met, as our political correspondent Phil Gaughan reports.
There was just one item on the Legislative Council order paper this week, but it was a significant one. In its second evidence stage on the assisted dying bill, MLCs heard from two expert witnesses, Bridget Carter and Dr Claude Regnard, as well as the bill's promoter, Alex Allinson. Ms Carter explained that cases of coercive behaviour towards vulnerable elderly people have increased since the COVID pandemic, and coercion and duress is hard for an untrained eye to spot.
The concept itself is a good idea, but it's not going to work with just two doctors, because these doctors are not trained in this. Financial abuse isn't just about the three elements that you're talking about, it's about the precursor elements, from the ground up. So you're looking at coercive control from the beginning, sort of get to the trust, building trust with the person.
Palliative care expert Dr Regnard was eager that assisted dying should not be delivered as part of our health services.
Would I trust doctors in this? No. And that's the reason that doctors have multidisciplinary teams. That's the whole point. And when they fail to do that, that's when you get errors, complaints and litigation. And I'm puzzled why there isn't a multidisciplinary team at the outset that is looking at this, and there should be.
Dr Allinson defended his bill and explained some of his thinking behind it.
The person who applies for an assisted death has a clear and settled intention to end their own life, reach voluntarily without coercion or duress, and having been informed about the person's diagnosis and prognosis and the treatments available, including pain control and palliative care. It's that wide range of things that are available, and so that conversation about the options that person has, the choice that person has, is intrinsically linked to their decision making and their declaration that then has to be confirmed by two independent doctors.
The bill will return to Legco for clauses stage on the 17th of December.
Political correspondent Phil Gaughan, and we will be following the proceedings on the 17th of December here at Manx Radio.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, all being well, it's fairly quiet out there at the moment. No reports on the police pages of any incidents. If you spot anything and you're able to let us know, that would be great. 166 177, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. But it's just the general roadworks that are happening across the Isle of Man. You can find a full list of those at manxradio.com as well. All looking okay down at the airport and at the steam packet as well. The next vessel due in will be the Manxman around about 6:15, and then heading out to Heysham again at 7:45.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at Quayside.
It's coming up to 18 minutes past 5. Any changes to the way drugs are regulated on the Isle of Man must ensure people are protected. Now, this comes from the Justice and Home Affairs Minister Jane Paul Wilson after Tynwald this month backed a report into the harms caused by drugs over here. With the document calling for a greater focus on public health over criminal justice, Minister Paul Wilson discussed what happens next, again with Phil.
One of the other things I think is really important is that we try and be evidence-led with this. We recognise the data perhaps isn't all it could or should be in the Isle of Man in terms of us having a really good understanding of the harms in our society. So one of the other principles was actually to try and make sure we build and do better around that data, partly so we can track the harms, but also it's important to know if you make changes in policy and changes in practice, is it having the desired effect? Is it doing what you hoped it would do? And I think that's really important. But also moving forward, I think it helps society understand better. So what are the different harms and what are the different things we can do to help people understand the harms and make informed choices?
Has the department not thought that maybe actually we should be looking at a greater amount of freedom in relation to drugs, so perhaps legalising some of the what are deemed to be the lower impact drugs?
one of the things that's quite interesting is when you look at the data in terms of what data we do have around use, it hasn't necessarily massively fluctuated over time. But I think your point about are people's attitudes different, I think there is a recognition that people's attitudes change, and it's not wholly generational, I think, but I think, most of us who have young children and people will talk about their grandchildren as well, recognise that there is more prevalence and more acceptance, I suppose, among our younger generation. And I think the other thing that we recognised in the report was we did acknowledge that, there is that issue for future consideration about, what does the longer term future look like in terms of how people can be protected, recognising that we probably do have to acknowledge there is an ongoing level of use of drugs. So what is the appropriate way forward, and the evidence that exists around how we regulate legal drugs and how we can help with harms both around legal and illegal drugs.
That is Justice and Home Affairs Minister Jane Paul Wilson talking to Phil. Again, another story you can find out more about at manxradio.com. Just gone 5:20. A new AI company is set to launch its services at a special event in Douglas this week. Now, Joggle is an AI platform specifically built to support small businesses via a suite of assistance for everything from social media posts to business documents. Siobhan has been talking to the Managing Director, Mike Alcock, about how the company assuages fears around job displacement or other unintended consequences.
A lot of the small businesses, certainly the ones we saw this morning, they're aware of AI, they can see it coming. Some of them are a little bit frightened of it. A lot of them are thinking, this is the future, this is going to save me a lot of time and effort and so on. And we're keen to build a product that works alongside small business owners. So we're not suggesting that Joggle will displace your marketing person. It will make your marketing person work more efficiently, more quickly and more cost effectively. You're still going to have the human element, and Joggle doesn't take that away. It doesn't automate everything. When you create a post, Joggle can write a post, but it's not going to get it perfect, and you've got the edit capability. And of course, coming up with the ideas, your marketing person can feed those into Joggle and make sure that it's got the right tone of voice and all of that sort of good stuff. So we're trying to work hand in hand with the people that you normally use.
So as that technology evolves, what commitments are you at Joggle making to transparency, particularly around data security and that sort of ethical use of AI?
Yeah, so we've worked really hard on that. In fact, we produced a little podcast using Joggle, which can now create podcasts, which is really interesting, on our GDPR policies and our data security. So Joggle is hosted, so it's currently a web application. It will very shortly be an app for Android and Apple phones as well, but it's hosted using Google's services. So we're using industrial strength hosting and industrial strength data protection. We've got a full GDPR policy written by our CTO, so we want to be a good global citizen. We don't want to be risking people's data, and we've made the strongest efforts we possibly could to secure it.
That's MD of Joggle, Mike Alcock there, and they're hosting their launch event from 5:30pm tomorrow alongside a series of workshops. You can find out when and where at manxradio.com. 5:22. Now, do you remember early this year when we brought you details of a sculpture it was hoped could be placed in Niarbyl? Well, designed by the renowned Manx artist Brian Kneale, the plans received some backlash, mainly due to the location. Well, now that location has changed, as Lewis Foster reports.
The new proposal, as per a planning application submitted this week, is to put the sculpture in St John's in the Tynwald National Park and Arboretum. The sculpture, known as Ellipse, resembles something of a door frame and is designed as a sort of portal to look through and appreciate the Manx scenery behind. Brian Kneale, of course, is the artist behind the Three Legs of Man at Ronaldsway Airport. Born in Douglas in 1930, he studied painting at the Douglas School of Art in 1947 before being accepted to the illustrious RA Schools programme, where by 1960 he developed his now widely exhibited sculptural practice. On the new location, the applicants say the site works well in capturing the vast and diverse beauty of the island, as well as being an accessible one of national significance. At a central location on the island, the history site resonates with the concept of the work itself, particularly with the proximity to the nearby Ballahara Stones. The proposal says despite spending much of his life in England, Mr Kneale's spirit has always been tied to the Isle of Man. The stories and landscape of the island have always permeated his work. Being no longer physically able to return to the Isle of Man as he did before, in recent years he's visited more often in his mind. The Ellipse project is expected to cost £96,948 in total. The bulk, £60,000, is to come from the Isle of Man Arts Council. A further £29,000 is to come from the Royal Academy Frampton Fund, £5,000 from the Kneale family, and £2,984 from Culture Vannin.
Lewis reporting there, and it's hoped the sculpture will be completed by mid next year. Time for sports news now, and here's Darren Timpson.
Good evening. Starting with swimming, and the Isle of Man National Swimming Championships concluded on Sunday. Joel Watson and Libby Curfey have been crowned as national champions after wins in the super final and women's 200-metre fly, respectively. Elsewhere, a new record was set in the 50-metre backstroke. Harry Robinson set a time of 24.92 seconds to break Grant Halsall's previous record. Onto athletics, and Manx Commonwealth athlete David Malarkey has impressed once more during the cross-country season in the United States. The Manxman recently finished 18th at the NCAADI Championships held at Madison on Saturday, the 23rd of November. Malarkey made his name on the Isle of Man while attending QE2 High School, and the cross-country runner's best performance of the season came earlier in November at the Big Sky Conference Cross-Country Championships in Pocatello, Idaho, where he won the event. The Manxman then attended Leeds University before setting off for the United States, and 2 weeks ago he recorded a 5th place finish in Reno, Nevada. Malarkey represents Northern Arizona University and began the cross-country season earlier in autumn with an 8th place finish in Notre Dame, Indiana. Staying with athletics, and Manx Sprint has made a great start to her winter indoor season at the Manchester Cup. Carla Tees completed the 60-metre sprint with a time of 7.85 seconds, her first time completing the event below 8 seconds. 17 universities competed at the event, with Carla representing Edge Hill University. And finally, the Special Olympics have given their end-of-year awards for 2024. Owen Langton won the Coaches Recognition Award, while James H won the Swimming Award. Footballers' Teammate of the Year went to Ollie Kavanagh, while Lawrence Dyer and Laura Oram won the Badminton and 10-pin bowling awards, respectively. And last but not least, Ben Wall was the recipient of the Nicola Woodridge Trophy.
Thank you very much indeed, Darren. Well, that is all from Update this evening. Thank you once again for your company. Remember, you can always find out more about tonight's top stories at manxradio.com. We have the newscast as well. That's the longer interviews where you can listen in full to what we can't always play on air. And you always have the chance to have your say on the Man in Line. 66 13 68 is the number to call during the programme from midday. But if you'd like to leave a message out of hours, you can do that. 682 631. Do stay with Manx Radio this evening, because coming up next it's Countryside with Simon and Kiri. Chris Kinley will be here from 6 live with Greatest Hits. John Barker has the Folk Show for you from 9, and Dave Moore will be here from 10 with After Hours. Whatever you're doing this evening, have a great one. We'll see you back here on Update tomorrow from 5.